Oh, hey, do y'all want to hear something funny get into the mood, get into the vibe, the rhythm.
Okay.
So the other day, we usually have a set time that we feed the cats dinner. They get the wet food, they meow a lot, cats as they do. So one day we went out to have to eat outside for dinner. But we left about half an hour before we normally feed the cats, and we forgot to feed the cats. Oops. So we ended up coming back like an hour and a half after their normal dinner time. And one of the cats, usually when we come home, in most situations, if it's near enough to that time, he'll be like at the inside of the door, meowing at the top of his lungs, letting us know he's there. And like he'll be so up against the door, like when we open the door, it pushes him like back. But this time, when we came in, he didn't meow for us while we're driving in, and we open the door. He's sitting like a few feet back from the door, like just sitting there staring directly at us. He looks me directly in the eyes, and he tells me in no uncertain terms that he was dying of meow nutrition.
Hello, good people, and welcome to Off the Deep End, a Deep Listens podcast where we cover role-playing video games in depth. I'm your host, Braden Arbitrary Water Redacted, the robot class of this party. Joining me, as always, is Chris Zombie Pie Redacted.
When I had a cat that I was like trying to sleep through them meowing me to feed them, it was my parents' cat and I was house sitting. And because I tried to sleep past their feeding point, they decided to spite shit in my shoes once. Just dropped a big old cat turd in my shoes. They knew that those shoes were shoes, and that to show their discontent of me not feeding them exactly at 5:30 a.m., they were gonna shit up those shoes.
The monster class of this party, and then finally, the Esper class of this party. It's Adam Borgmaster Redacted.
Yes, hello. I have 77 problems, and Sunlight ain't one.
That's right. Why are we gathered here today? I'll tell you why.
We decided that there were some games that were on the fan pick bucket or docket or whatever you want to call it, and we thought they had a commonality, which is portability. Now, I know those of you that are gaming right now, you might not remember this weird era where people used to play video games on the go, and they were like devices that weren't cell phones, and you had to like buy cartridges and discs and SD cards that had those games, and they were like a dedicated game playing device.
But Chris Zombie Pie Redacted, I just play Elden Ring on my Steam Deck in my bed.
Okay, Swedish chef. I don't know why that's always Braden's go-to voice when he's trying to make third-person input, but yes.
How much of the listenership is based in Sweden?
I wish they would add this to the Switch.
But anyways, no, we noticed that we had 3 portable games in the fan pick pile. All 3 of these games would not be enough to justify their own podcast or separate podcasts.
Oh,
so
just
we grouped them together. We grouped them together.
Yep. We did a triple threat. And that triple threat is triple fan pick portable podcast. Before we get onto that, though, regular show things, you can support us on Patreon patreon.com/deeplistens. We now have a $3 tier that will allow you to subscribe to our probably monthly bonus podcast, the Oji-san cast, where Chris Zombie Pie Redacted and me and one Peter Busby watch anime that is for old people, which is to say anime that is older than 2015, probably.
So-
I don't know.
Now, hear me out, youngins, the youngs out there. Before your Crunchyrolls, you had to rely on terrestrial television. Now, you know
Well,
that
before your
big
Crunchyroll, you had
box.
to rely on Crunchyroll.
Yeah, you had to rely on Crunchyroll, but even before Crunchyroll, you had to rely on terrestrial television to air mostly censored and localized works, sometimes questionably and sometimes correctly. Anime on the television tube thing.
You had to go to a Suncoast video, and you had to go into the back and be like, "Hello, sir. I would like to purchase 5 DVDs
For
of
$200.
Neon Genesis Evangelion for $30 each in 2004 money."
And they'll card you and put it in a paper bag for you and just generally treat you like a
Sir,
pervert.
sir, I require some Ikitosen.
And then you would just leave the store with just this sense of being covered in grime because
Okay, so
Suncoast
the
was not a good
mall-
place.
The mall was a
Oh,
place
we have
you
to
would go
explain the
to
mall.
before you just bought everything on the internet. There was a place called anyway. So yeah, you can now we are going to watch Ergo Proxy for our next episode. That's probably going to be recorded in the next week or two. So you can look forward to that, dear listeners, if you pay us money. Know what else you can do if you pay us money? That's right. Get your game in the Deep Listen slush pile, and then we'll play it on a podcast like this. Maybe 3 years late, but we'll do it. Let's see, what else?
Maybe donate money out of spite if you don't like us.
Yeah,
We'll still
donate
play your
money out
game.
of spite to get us to play a game that you know we'll dislike.
Yeah,
I've said it before. There are
treat us
games that
like
I would...
the clown in the dunk tank at the fair, right? You pay the money so that you can dunk us in the water.
dunk your middle school gym teacher, which is us.
Oh, okay. So they're saying is we should play Spriggan at some point.
There are some things I would be willing to play for
That
the
have-
fans that I
Uh-huh.
would veto if Chris Zombie Pie Redacted presented them. And that is the only permission
know.
I will give.
Therefore,
know.
it is up to
Fans at
you, the
home.
listeners, to force Braden to play a Hyperdimension Neptunia game.
Neptunia.
I'll play a Neptunia game if you throw money at me. Otherwise, fuck off. Speaking of
All right.
Speaking of
off,
fucking off,
so
here
our
we go.
first game in this pile came from a friend of the show, Patreon subscriber Zeto, and it is Medabots, Medabi, and Rokusho version. Both of which were developed by Natsume and released in either March 31st, 2003, or maybe September of 2002. I don't know. I'm not sure if Medabots and Medabot AX are different games or not.
So, a couple of little special notes. This was the game where I think we each, while we all played the games, that all three of
Yes.
them, I think we all decided to focus on at least one of these games more than others. So my focus was the Medabots option here. And the first big interesting thing that I think is wild is that this game, Medabots, Medabi, and Roku Show, is a remake of a Japanese exclusive Game Boy Color game from '99 called Medarot 2. And it was basically the game they chose to bring over to the United States because it's a little bit more advanced than the first game. It has a couple of concepts that didn't exist in the first game, but it was simple enough to sell to kids that were starting to ease into the anime, which was picked up and airing on television by 4Kids Fox. Was that Fox for Kids?
Fox
But
Kids.
They were still working with 4Kids, right?
I do not know the exact.
Okay, but
4Kids had their shows on everything.
yeah, the franchise, this game was developed by Natsume, which is
Serious fun.
Yeah, a pretty important developer at the time, and still kind of is, though they recently sold out to Atari of all places. So their full name right now is Natsume Atari.
Okay.
And they've done. If you've played yourself an NES game or a Super Nintendo game, you've probably played a Natsume game. They are pretty well known for being adapters of anime and manga properties that are starting to show some popularity.
Yeah.
And like they had the Power Rangers IP for the longest time. So all of those SNES Power Rangers games were them. But they were also a publisher.
Were the Harvest Moon people.
Yeah, they were the Harvest Moon people before that whole debacle got messy.
Yes, the Harvest Moon Story of Seasons split, where Story of Seasons are the games you care about, and modern Harvest Moon is apparently absolute dog shit.
Yeah, so there's a weird split with Natsume. The current version of Natsume is owned by Atari. They recently published Euden Chronicle Rising. They're still out there. They're still alive. They're still acquiring IPs for like pre-existing television shows, especially for kids. So their niche has always been making games for kids. And oh, right. I'm sorry. I just looked it up. So this version of Atari is Atari's old Pachi Slot company that existed in Japan. It's not technically the American video game company. It's the weird arcade division that persisted after Infogrames decided to not pick up the arcade portion of the business.
So this is the third Atari.
Yeah, this is like the third Atari. Medabots is a property largely owned by Imagineer, who still owns the IP and recently re-released the first trio of games for the Switch, but only in Japan.
I looked this up. I had no fucking clue there were 9 of these games, plus one called Medabots Girl Side.
This franchise was actually a surprise success for them in Japan. Their attempts to bring it to the United States were
this one
okay. Like they didn't lose money on it.
And they did an action one for the GameCube.
And they also the anime did okay. It didn't do terribly. It did okay. Now this is going to be the second thing from Imagineer that we have tackled because we played Quest 64 and they were the lead developers of Quest 64. Again, let's just say Imagineer, also a developer that generally speaking more skews towards a younger audience.
Well, Quest 64 is a classic.
Yeah. And I think the thing that still surprises me is they made a lot of these Medabot video games. Like it was a moneymaker for them. They even made a Medabot iOS game, an Android game in Japan that was running for like 4 or 5 years before they pulled the servers. Kind of wild, kind of bananas. Like it still exists out there. I think that right now, Imagineer kind of realizes, oh, we can actually just remaster these games and republish them on the Switch, and people who grew up with this stuff will buy it. They have innate nostalgia. But despite the fact that they made 9+ games of Medabots, only 3 ever came outside of Japan. And this is one of them. This is, in fact, the first, if I recall correctly. And people like this game because by the standard of a game that is for children, it's got a lot going for it. I don't think I enjoyed it wonderfully. I wasn't leaping for joy, as you guys know. I think that it's a game that clearly is designed to like suck up your batteries on your GBA or Game Boy Color because, portable games just had arbitrary length to sell you on the idea of, ooh, here's this sparkly trinket. I want to get that Medabot, right?
I have to rot them all, I believe is the correct term.
Yeah.
So, Chris, how does Medabots Metabee Rokusho play? Is it like them Pokemans?
Yes, and also no. This game actually has a weird vestigial relationship. Like, not vestigial, but this game kind of has some odd ways in which it evokes the SaGa game that we played because it's weirdly bespoke. It doesn't play like the way that you think it would play. Its leveling system is very different. So the gameplay is basically split into 2 parts. You have the standard world map, which is very evocative of Pokemon. And then you have the battles, which are eventually a 3 versus 3 battle system where you are constructing these robots that basically do cockfighting, right? Same thing as Pokemon, except this really does skew you towards the 3 versus 3 side of things. When you start a battle, you have 4 different actions. You can select different parts of the robot to queue up different attacks. And attacks that come from your right or your left arm have infinite ammo, whereas the attacks that are connected to your head have finite ammo. Also, if the Medabot is damaged or has their head destroyed, they are immediately KO'd and are no longer in the battlefield. Though after a battle is over, everyone's HP restores to maximum. The legs don't necessarily have any attacks, but they impact your movement speed, especially when we're talking about the different terrains. Certain feet are faster in navigating terrains than others.
ATB bar, baby.
Yes, it's an ATB bar based turn. Is this a turn-based RPG or is it just ATB plus they animate the character?
Because your legs determine how quickly your turn comes.
So it moves and animates in real time to manifest that ATB meter, but it is still basically an ATB turn-based combat system. Yeah. Your Medabot gets into the middle point of the screen. You queue up attacks at the far left-hand side of the screen. They run up to the midpoint of the screen, do the attacks or the moves that you've selected for them, and then they run back to the far end of the screen so as that you can now queue up the next move that you want.
It's also 3v3.
Yeah.
That's the other thing about this game that I think is both very interesting and perhaps the thing that keeps it from being the most simple game for children.
So it being 3v3. So would that be if Pokemon is like Street Fighter, then Medabots is King of Fighters?
Yeah.
Kind of.
Kind of. Except competitive Pokemon is 2v2.
Yeah, the competitive Pokemon has absolutely switched to the 2v2 stuff. There's still 1v1 stuff, but the 2v2 stuff is kind of superseded.
In general, the default format for competitive Pokemon is doubles.
I'm about 20 years behind.
However, as both of you know from watching me play this game, the big thing about this game is RNG. So when you queue up attacks, normally, when you're targeting a certain Medabot or Medabot part, it's usually randomized. Now, there are certain meta parts that have intrinsic abilities to aim at certain parts or aim at certain objects. And you can engage with this really Byzantine and hidden programming system, very similar to like the Gambit system in Final Fantasy 12. But not that complex because you're just queuing up what order you want them to behave if you want to select auto. But for the layperson, most people are going to be engaging with this combat system basically at the whims of select attack, go at it, please hit the right target, please hit the right part. You didn't, well, shit, go back to the back of the line, let's try it again. And on top of that, whereas, in Pokemon, you're just kind of like, okay, is this Pidgeot going to drop? Is this Dugtrio going to appear? I'll go catch them once they do. The meta parts that you have are all of these parts, because the merchants are absolutely worthless. They don't sell almost anything that you want, especially when you're exploring a new environment. You basically have to just fight people either through random encounters or just going up to people and talking to them and hoping that they drop new parts that you don't have. And sometimes those parts are complementary to the metals, which are the power core that powers up your robots. So you need parts, cores, and tin pits. Tin pits are the skeleton. The metals are basically the soul. And then
so these robots have souls.
Parts. Yeah, these robots have souls. They are a part of the ecosystem. And this is where I pulled a Borgmaster and I started to watch the anime, similar to how Borgmaster started watching Yu-Gi-Oh! When he basically got bribed to play Yu-Gi-Oh! For the children. So there was an ancient civilization of people who used the robots long, long ago.
It wasn't the Incans, was it? Or
no,
the Egyptians?
No.
Okay,
it's
good.
just like ancient aliens shit. Surprise, like one of them's like an evil doctor's cat. But these Medabots are a part of the ecosystem, but they're able to talk. But they're okay with fighting. And this is the part where I say the strangeness of the story is the best part. Like, it is distinctly Japanese, and it is kind of a miracle that this show and franchise worked outside of Japan, because it feels even more than Pokemon and more than Digimon. It feels like rooted in Japanese culture in a way where they didn't boil it out the way that they boiled out the Japanese references
I love jelly
and foods,
donuts.
Stuff in Pokemon, because you just straight up have your characters dressed up in kimonos, and they call them kimonos. There's gags in which young children are harassed by yokai, and they call them yokai or ghosts. It's very bizarre, and the weird thing is similar to Borgmaster's experiences with Yu-Gi-Oh! The video games are comedic. The anime is pretty dark and serious, with people actually being grievously injured or harmed. So that tradition is also a part of Medabots.
Well, I mean, in Yu-Gi-Oh!, at least in 5Ds, when they die, they get brought back as evil signers. It's a whole thing.
A lot of people die in children's card games.
Happens all the time.
This game has a lot of unique things.
Yes.
It's got a weird relationship system, and similar to SaGa 2, you can screw yourself over by making a mistake in the opening phase of it.
Wait, so there's social links here?
Uh-huh. You can figure out if you want the little girl with the pigtails or the girl next door as your romance option.
They're
how are the characters?
They're
middle
schoolers.
Middle schoolers?
Yeah, which makes the whole part of the story where we have to find a robot that's tickling little girls a little creepy, and one of the gangs being a bunch of perverts.
Yeah.
It's odd.
Strange. There is a strange tone to this game's writing that I don't know how much of it is localization and how much of it is just this is what the text was. It also is weird because the character portraits look like they are stills from the anime that were cut out, and then
They took them out and then like cell shaded them using MS Paint. They look awful.
Yeah, and basically scaled down to the 320 by 240 screen of a GBA.
Yeah, and like not even like keyframes is that the correct word? Like not even like the frames of the characters you would want.
They're just like the basic outlines of the characters. Like some of them also this game for a GBA game, it is very clear that this was an up-resed or remake of a Game Boy Color game. Not only that, but it's very of the era platform-specific GBA music. This game sounds like shit. Oh my god. Oh.
We've talked about the GBA sound chip before, but
no bueno.
The next game I feel like uses it correctly. But this game, the music just it sounds like garbledy mess.
It's shrill, it's bad. This game don't look good, but
it's interesting. How much of it did you play? Because you played it for like what, 8 hours?
Yeah, no. Yesterday I played it for 5 hours straight.
Okay.
So I played more like 10 hours, and like I said, like it's charming. It's notoriously long. People who know what they're doing can probably finish it in 17 hours, and if you do everything in the game, including every single side quest, I hear that it's upwards of 30 hours, which for a portable game for kids, is unheard of. Well, I guess not
could
really.
Spend that time in Ruby and Sapphire easily.
Yeah, I guess like the philosophy with children games is we know that kids have one video game per month, so we better get the word out that you get your money's worth.
Is there too much water in Medabots and Rokusho?
Not really, no.
Okay, so higher than a 7.8, you'd say.
It's interesting.
Okay, so for the audience at home, the too much water joke is a reference to the video game website IGN.com, who gave a review of Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire versions, which featured a complaint about the amount of water traversal in the game. This joke was then reduced down to too much water and mimetically spread across the internet.
I mean, honestly, IGN was right about that specific.
They were right.
The water traversal
right.
stuff actually
there's too much
terrible.
water traversal in those games.
It really is true. But with this game, it really does go across a bunch of disparate and, fun little spots. They're interesting, funny characters like the Phantom Renegade. There's gags and jokes, and that's kind of funny. And overall, like, if I was a kid, this would have been a game that I would have played in between, like, going to the park or the pool on summer days, and then I play it for 2 months straight before I get to the end. Like, as frustrating as I thought the RNG side of things was, you really do get to a point to where you're able to, like, always kind of move forward. I would just say I think that the iconography in the game is pretty poor. Knowing the hard tells about which moves are good against certain types, and like the symbology in the game is just bad. And there is a lot of trial and error in that when you get an ability that is like the hard opposite of what you're going up against, that's a great feeling. But then when that's played against you, sometimes you're just left thinking like, well, do I not have the part to get through this efficaciously? Did I fail to like spend the time to pick up stuff?
Is the rock paper scissors type stuff harder to grasp than Pokemon's?
I think in part it is because there's more than just elements. Like when you hear, oh, this core type or this metal is bear type. What element or what abilities do you think is bear? Well, it turns out it's melee focus and grappling.
Okay.
But there's other things that would make sense with bear. And here's another like sign of this game maybe should have taken the Pokemon route. There's a core for your robot called Kappa, which is a reference to a well-known lore and mythological figure called the Kappa. That's your water type core.
That seems like a translation thing that maybe would have been confusing if you were 10.
And then also the robots are gendered, and so sometimes you have a lot of boy parts and not enough girl parts, and then sometimes you got a lot of girl parts that don't match with the boy parts. And like, actually, I think that another criticism I have of this game, it just doesn't give you all 3 robots quick enough. Like, it was hour 5 before I had all 3. And that just, to me, playing this game with just 1 robot for as long as you do kind of sucked. Like, it's just too slow. And that 3rd robot, because the experience point system, there's no, like, EXP share, like, getting that 3rd robot to par was kind of a pain. But I don't know. What did you guys think? I probably played the most out of all 3 of us.
You played the most of it by a significant margin.
Yes, the character sprites did bad things to my internal wiring. It's in my brain.
Did you think that Medabots compared favorably or unfavorably to that Yu-Gi-Oh game that you played in terms of artistic and like mechanics?
Probably the Yu-Gi-Oh game's better, but the issue with Yu-Gi-Oh video games is that you have to know how to play Yu-Gi-Oh.
I think the closest analog for this, for us, is probably Biomotor Unitron, because it's a similar concept of robot building turned into Pokemon.
I mean, there's also RoboPit for the PlayStation.
There are many robot building RPGs. A
Custom
shocking
Robo.
number. Custom Robo. Gotcha Force.
So do we want to rank all
Armored
3 of these
Core.
at the end, or are we going to rate Medabots and then move on to the next game?
Well,
I'm sorry.
Yeah. I feel like I agree with most of what you were saying, because I think there's a lot of neat stuff in this game, but it's ideas, and the actual game part of the game is not anywhere near as interesting as the ideas it tries to present with team building and combat.
The number of times where it's like, I just wish I could pick every part, any part, or just pick
just like
a robot.
Weird. It replaces a lot of potential depth with like
RNG. Yeah. Oddly enough, that means that this game has like weird synergy with SaGa too, because that game also lives and dies by its horrible RNG and backwards ass leveling systems.
Great.
Like, you can make weird hybrid robots and abominations. But yeah,
right.
it almost doesn't.
I'm gonna pull up
do
the
enough
list.
to.
Let's.
So on the list, how does this game compare to Quest 64?
So I was actually going to say, let's start with Biomotor Unitron. This is worse than Biomotor Unitron.
This is worse than Biomotor Unitron.
Of course.
You can purchase Biomotor Unitron on modern platforms if you want.
They re-released this game for the... When did they re-release this game specifically?
This was also on the Wii U Virtual Console, by the way.
Oh, you know, that wonderful Wii U Virtual Console that's still
Wii U Virtual Console had a lot of kick-ass games.
No, I'm saying that, you can still log in and use your Wii U. Oh, wait, no.
And, they definitely put all of those games that were on the Virtual Console onto that the Nintendo Switch Online expansion pass system.
Okay. What's below Biomotor Unitron?
Sorry. So let's go a bit below that. How's this compared to Zelda 2?
Oh boy.
Oh boy. I
mean, functionally kind of the same spirit in that it has interesting ideas, but it almost executes on them a little too poorly or roughly.
I would
maybe play Medabots before Zelda 2 because I wouldn't want to bang my head into a wall. Like,
so how does this compare to Ys 3?
How does this? I think.
Wait, do you think it's better than Zelda 2, or do you think it's worse?
I'll maintain that there is a version of Zelda 2 where you can have an alright time, and it's the version where you don't have to level up. So, whereas even if I had cheats with this game, I would.
I don't know. I think that certain quality of life additions
Yeah.
could make this an okay experience. I'm willing to go below Zelda 2 just because I think that people have made games that are evoking the spirit of Zelda 2, but I don't think anyone's really gone back to other than like
I
a
would
robot
put Zelda
Pokemon.
2 above this.
So then the real question next is: this better or worse than Time and Eternity?
Oh, this is better than Time and Eternity.
This is better than Time and Eternity.
Is this better than Fear and Hunger? The another Zeto classic. Thanks, Zeto.
Thanks, Zeto.
Nemesis of the pod, Zeto.
I would rank this above.
I would
Time
rank
and
this
Eternity.
above Fear and Hunger because it makes me feel less gross.
I would hope so.
Yeah, probably.
All right,
Probably.
then congratulations to our new number 33, Medabots, Metabee, and Rokusho version.
So ZP mentioned earlier about playing the Game Boy Advance in between going to the park or going to the pool or just being outside on a summer's day.
Yeah.
So is there anything on the Game Boy Advance that would encourage you to be outside on a summer's day?
Something that would perhaps contain the sun in the palm of my hand?
Say what?
I got to play Boktai.
Well, we all played Boktai.
I mean, yeah, we all played Boktai, but yo, Boktai, my dude. First off, Boktai was recommended to us by friend of the show, Recky Wills. He streams on the Twitch, and he was in, I think, our fan translation grab bag episode.
Yep, he was there when we decided to torture him with some poorly picked.
We
games.
played Arabian Nights.
Oh, that sounds good.
Yeah, that game's not very good.
No.
There's a reason why it's near the bottom of the line of mediocrity. But
this game is not mediocre. This game is
not
pretty
mediocre.
rad. But as Braden will probably talk about in a little bit, we are in a bit of a bind. So,
Yeah.
Braden, why don't you introduce what is Boktai?
Boktai, The Sun is in Your Hand, was developed by Konami Computer Entertainment Japan and came out in the United States on September 16th, 2003. It is not an RPG. We have been fairly generous with our genre definition of RPG.
So much so that we have a bit of a recurring joke where I say, well, we're playing a role to taunt and annoy Braden.
And then I tell you to shut up.
But yeah, this is not an RPG. I don't know how Borgmaster feels. I don't think this was we played a Zelda. Like, that's what we ended up doing.
It is Zelda by way of Metal Gear.
Oh, so does Boktai answer the question finally of can love bloom on the battlefield?
No, only sun fruits.
That tracks.
So this game is known for two things. It's known for the weird sun feature where you have to like actually time when you use
you have
the game
to go
or when you play the game
and bring your Game Boy outside into the sun. And keep in mind this is 03, so this is like I think right before the SP dropped. So this is your non-backlit regular Game Boy Advance. You are being asked to play it outside because there is a solar sensor on the top of the Game Boy cartridge. And that is this game's core mechanic, core identity. is sometimes y'all just gotta go outside so you can charge up your sun gun.
It's shockingly inconvenient to whoever plays it, which makes the game incredibly respectable in how it inconveniences the people who are trying to play it, because
They were cooking with this one.
yeah, they really had ideas.
Like the idea of you need to go outside and you need when the sun is out in the real world in order to progress in this video game.
So how does it feel to have Hideo Kojima tell you to go touch grass?
Well, that's the other thing that this game is well known being. It's
Is he
sometimes
produced it,
people's he produced it, and people who are being kind of facetious will say Boktai is their favorite Kojima game. But while he produced it, it does not seem like he was like actively
No, like there's clearly some
developing
Metal
it.
Gear influence with this game in terms of the stealth mechanics.
It's not to say that he didn't like play any role with its development, and maybe he shared off some ideas he wanted to see in the game, but it is
He was working on Snake Eater.
yeah, it's not an actual Hideo Kojima. Now, if you want to say Snatcher or Police Knots are your favorite Hideo Kojima games, and you don't want to utter the words Metal Gear Solid, I will hear you.
I'll listen to
anyone
you.
who says Police Knots is their favorite Kojima game is a freak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what?
Just saying.
Yeah.
Now, Snatcher, on the other hand. Anyway. Boktai.
So Boktai, how does this
Boktai.
play, Braden? It's Zelda-like, but
Boktai
also
is isometric, sprite-based. You run around these rooms. There are you got to charge up your gun, the Gun del Sol, in order to use the power of the sun to blast the undead to bits, or often just stun them with sunlight and then knock them into a switch so you can progress. I would
Is this
describe
Alan Wake?
a little bit, yeah.
this is like reverse Alan Wake, right?
I mean, there are multiple games from this era that used light as banishment for undead creatures before Alan Wake. Siren 2 is a game that uses flashlights to stun enemies, and so on. But yeah, it's an isometric action adventure game where you solve a lot of block puzzles. And I'd say there's a lot of pushing blocks, but there's also a lot of interplay between having sunlight outside, or pressing a button combination in order to make the sunlight level go up. But I would never do that, because of course I played this on a real Game Boy Advance and really went outside while it was sunny, because I'm an adult and I just have time to do that.
Yeah. It's
and
dungeon based also, right?
It's
like,
dungeon. Yes, it
another
is dungeon based, like a
thing.
Zelda. Where there's an overworld. You're running through the overworld, and they're like little small dungeon rooms. And then there are places where the vampires hang out. And
Now, Reki's not the only person who's characterized Boktai as an RPG.
you can level up your gun frames.
But is that enough?
I would say no.
If you're not loving the character,
I'm to
then-
understand that Boktai 2 has a lot more action RPG elements to it and is less about stealth, but he didn't recommend that one. And Boktai 3 only came out in Japan, so I don't know shit about that one. But
this game's rad, dude. Like,
this game is fucking cool.
Yeah.
Like, there's shit where it's like, all right, in order to solve this puzzle, you need to go inside, or you need to cover the sun sensor on your Game Boy Advance so that the lights turn off in this room. And it does that in real time. And then when you beat a boss, you have to drag his coffin back to the entrance of the dungeon, and you have to solve a bunch of puzzles while lugging around a heavy coffin. And it's like, there's a lot of really interesting, really creative shit going on here. I don't know if it would necessarily last like the full 10 hours or whatever, however long this game is. But there is an inventiveness to this, and also just the sheer insanity. The actual batshit weirdness of telling a child, imagine telling 11-year-old me, if you want to play this game, you have to go outside now. There are obviously like mechanics that are built in to help you in the dark. Like you can store and retrieve solar power at batteries scattered around maps. There is a loan system where you can take out sunlight loans from shady dealers. And these are the kinds of mechanics that are you kind of lose out on if you're playing this on an emulator.
But so, are you losing out on a good time, or are you losing out on like the frustrations?
I think, well, yes, and yes. Right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because I think even with let's say the ability to turn the sun level up and down with a button combination, in perhaps, let's say, a patched ROM, I think it's still solid as like a action adventure, like block pushy sort of game. Zelda by way of Metal Gear. I'll say that again.
Zelda Gear.
But I think the sun stuff gives it a specific character, and it's one of those things where I think as a child I would have either been super into it or I would have hated it. No way of knowing.
Like, kids want to have everything at their fingertips, and for a game to like
But
take the time to say
also are
no,
super patient.
no. Well, I think that's the cool thing is like, let's say that you're doing a dungeon and it's late and you're a kid and you just completed your homework and you really can't play video games until you finish your homework and after school, right?
You cannot banish the vampires until it is light outside.
And so you have to kind of rush and push yourself to take up this task, because when the sun goes down and you try and fight that boss, and let's say it's nighttime, you done goofed.
This
You're
is
gonna have
kind of
to wait.
similar to the Animal Crossing problem.
Yeah.
But at least with Animal Crossing, there's some overlap with like late morning to afternoon and afternoon to early evening and dusk.
Like they figured it out to make it more accessible for different times of day, for different lifestyles, I suppose. Whereas Boktai, it's like, no, kid, sunlight.
Sunlight.
Kid, go outside. Oh, I'm sorry. You live in you live in Norway and it's the winter. Sorry.
Yeah, have you tried not living in Norway, kid?
I assume this game came out in Norway.
Just for full transparency, 11-year-old Adam saw this game on XPlay, saw them talk about how you had to go outside, and then made the conscious choice to not play it.
Oh. I'm sorry to hear that. Because
it's a good game.
The
dungeon design is actually shockingly good. Like, I was kind of like surprised. It takes advantage of all of its mechanics, whether it be the sun-based puzzles to you have to design these dungeons to do a lot of things. You have to have these dungeons work well if the sun is up, and then also they have to work well to punish the player if it's dark. Though you get more rewards
but
if you do
sometimes you
these
have to
dungeons.
go while it's dark.
Yeah, there are dungeons that are specifically meant for the darkness, and they reward a lot more than when you
Yeah.
try and tackle them at night or at day. You get a lot of good stuff, except they're
Yeah.
harder. So there's a risk reward in terms of
Yeah.
like pushing yourself depending on the time.
It's like,
And then you have to design these dungeons to be able to drag those coffins outside.
Yeah,
So they really
and then you
thought a lot.
be able to go back through the dungeon while lugging a giant coffin. I'm genuinely saying this game has some juice. It has some game juice. I think it's really smart in a lot of ways. I'm probably going to play more of it. I do not think it is an RPG, and I would disqualify it from Off the Deep End.
So it is not being ranked.
What do either of you think?
This is a action adventure game, and thus it belongs on a different ranking list.
Yeah,
I'm going to agree with that. I think that this is a Zelda-like with one weapon, while a core weapon that you can level up to boost stats.
You can switch the kind of shots your sun gun uses. There's like a wide beam, there's a spinning one, there is a short range shotgun blast, more or less.
But customizing your gun is not in and of itself a leveling system, because then
No.
Call of Duty would be an RPG.
Isn't Call of Duty an RPG? The number goes up.
I mean, Call of Duty has RPGs in it.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's an action game. It's an action
sometimes people
adventure
use
game.
those rocket propelled grenades against me and it makes me mad.
So because this is more of a Zelda-like, how does it compare to something like Darksiders?
I
Hmm.
mean,
all right. So I'm pulling up a spreadsheet. Let's make a list.
ranking Zelda-likes.
Every Zelda-like. Yes.
Okay. Welcome to our new spin-off podcast. Off the
Zelda
Rupee End.
Oh, that's better.
And all right, so at number 1 is
Zelda 2.
Zelda 2. No. What's a good Zelda like?
What is a good Zelda-like?
Zelda 2.
Darksiders 1.
There's Shining
Okami.
Wisdom. Is a Zelda-like.
Shining Wisdom.
There's Darksiders.
Do people like Alundra?
Okami.
Oh, there's Okami.
Tunic. People like that Zelda like a Fox game.
Tunic, which I'm to understand is a Fez, not a Zelda.
I remember when people lost their what when so Polygon made a games to play after you beat Breath of the Wild, and they put Portal 2 there, and people lost their shit.
Pretty funny. I mean, people should play Portal 2 in general.
But they called it a Zelda-like.
That's very funny.
In that it has puzzles.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly their philosophy. If you like the puzzles of Zelda, you should play Portal.
Like,
that's an incredible shit post.
For this shit post podcast idea, I think the core concepts of a Zelda-like are you have to get items.
You're not leveling. You are
leveling.
collecting special items to improve combat options and traversal in highly designed situations.
But it's not a
overworld and
Metroid.
dungeons. What's that?
It's not a Metroid.
That's not a Metroid. So it's like 3D Game Hero is a Zelda-like.
Yes. Anyway, Boktai fucking rips, I think, maybe. I think this game might be cool. And I wish I had played it as a lad. Because I remember seeing it in Nintendo Power and being like, you have to go outside? That's weird. Because I didn't like going outside. And now look at me.
Vitamin D deficiency.
Yeah, no, I have to take vitamin D because I have vitamin D deficiency.
So
Have
we're
you tried becoming a
disqualifying
vampire?
Boktai, right?
We are
They-
disqualifying Boktai. Thank you for playing.
play Boktai.
Play Boktai. Their
It's
patches
yeah,
to
it's
make.
shockingly good and easy to play on an emulated device. I don't know if they've ever re-released it on Switch, but it's a good time. Play Boktai out
Play
there.
Boktai.
And now, speaking of shitposts, it's
All
time for our
right.
final game of
Yeah.
the episode.
Yeah. Okay. So we here at Off the Deep End are noted big fans of Brain in a Jar, man who uses his company seniority to make one game every 5 to 10 years, Akitoshi Kawazu. And as part of
Yes.
that, we were recommended SaGa 2 Haiho Densetsu by Cronoan. This game came out for the Nintendo DS on September 17th, 2009, developed by Rockjin Co., who I looked at their credits and it turns out they've made a lot of random stuff. But this is a remake of Final Fantasy Legend 2, aka SaGa 2, aka SaGa 2, the sequel to SaGa, the sequel to Final Fantasy 2.
Which was released on the Game Boy in 1991?
Yes.
Yes.
But this game only came out in Japan. A fan translation came out in 2011. That's what I used. I made my main character a robot, and then he's like, I gotta go find my dad. And I'm like, this
He's not a
game's
robot.
amazing.
Your dad's not a robot, right?
Your dad is a human. He is not a
Yes.
robot.
Yes. All right, so it's hard to discuss this game without understanding the brain in a jar behind it. So, Akitoshi Kawazu,
Yeah.
or Kawazu Akitoshi.
I'm
if you wanna do it
aware of
properly.
him. I've played this game called Unlimited SaGa.
Yes, he played the unlimited SaGa. But before the SaGa became unlimited, it was in fact highly limited. For years beforehand. So, Kawazu, I'm born in I think the '60s in Kyushu. Grew up working class family. Went to go make it in technology because he saw an Apple II once and was like, "Wow, that's crazy." And so wanted to get in on the video game things. He grew up being way into board games. He liked to make board games for fun in his youth. And when you think about what kind of board games were popular in Japan in, let's say, the 70s, Jinsei games, just keep that in mind as we move forward. He eventually ends up getting hired at Square, just kind of off the street almost. As a junior programmer, he works on Rad Racer. He gets pulled into the Final Fantasy team. Some random fantasy game that Square was making in the mid '80s, and he works his way up to be, I guess, the not combat designer, or I guess just one of the lead designers for Final Fantasy II. And the progression system in that game was his idea, that he had to get past everyone else working on that game. And that progression system is like what you youngins might remember from Skyrim, except more insane.
Yeah, I know they played this Final Fantasy 2 on the main pod, and I
Yes,
believe
we
they
did.
loved it, right?
It's a classic.
Yeah.
It's breakable. It's funny how you can break it. Everything else about the game is kind of a pain in the ass and a piece of shit.
The funniest part is Kawazu didn't even expect people to break the game because he was, I guess, thinking off in his own direction and wasn't thinking like a gamer. Then when gamers got their hands on
He's a
it, they're like,
designer. He is not a
Yeah.
gamer. He does not make games for people.
yes, he designs them for himself.
Is the SaGa franchise one of the most confusing franchises
No.
in video games?
Oh,
No.
I mean, in
I mean,
what
it
way?
starts out. No, I mean, like, so it starts out as the Final Fantasy Legend.
Only in the
They
US.
make Legend 2 and Legend
It starts
3.
out as SaGa. And
Yeah.
SaGa 2, SaGa 3.
Makai
And then they do
Tose
Romancing Saga.
And then Romancing Sagas.
then
1 through
Romancing
3.
Saga, then Saga Frontier.
Yeah, because there's a
Then
generation
Unlimited
change.
Saga basically shit the bed.
Yeah,
they
and
waited
then
10 years.
and then he made a Scarlet, and then the remakes of 2 and 3 came out for the DS, and then he made
then
Scarlet Grace,
Grace.
and now he made Emerald Frontier.
I hear
Yeah.
that those remasters of those early games is pretty bad.
You can play those first 3 Saga games. You can pay $40 American for the re-release of Final Fantasy
Sagas.
Legend 1 through 3
Yes.
on Switch or Steam.
Yeah,
Yes.
don't do that.
So Kawazu designs the progression battle system Final Fantasy 2, makes it very exploitable. Doesn't realize he's making it very exploitable. Because he's doing the thing that a bunch of designers did, probably half a dozen times in the 80s and 90s, all independently of each other. We're taking the idea of, okay, you have set classes, the Dungeons and Dragons, RPG thing of you have set classes, you're like a fighter, mage, whatever, you have levels, you're getting experience, it's all very tiered, it's all very structured. What if you unstructured it? And you're in fact developing the classes of the characters as you're playing, and they're developing according to your play style. It's kind of an obvious idea, but that people came up with several times independently of each other. Kawazu is one of them, and that's why Final Fantasy 2 is the way it is. So apparently, the higher ups at Square were happy enough with him after that when the Game Boy came out in Japan with the Tetris and all of that, the head of Square, I think Miyamoto, I forget his first name, went to Kawazu, told him to get some people and to make one of those Tetris things so they can make all that money. He takes that team, doesn't make a puzzle game, doesn't make a Tetris knockoff. He instead has them make an RPG. Continuing the ideas from Final Fantasy II. And
this is
SaGa
one of the first RPGs on the Game Boy.
This is the first RPG on the Game Boy.
It is the first.
The first. RPGs on the Game Boy, it goes SaGa, SaGa 2, Seiken Densetsu, SaGa 3, and then goes off from there. So Square was like the one. So Square were the ones doing it first.
I mean, oddly enough, like Square was making ambitious games for the Game Boy. We talked about this with our previous
Final Fantasy Adventure kind of
Game Boy game. They were really pushing the technology and doing things that not even like Nintendo was doing.
Yeah, and probably in an ill-advised manner, perhaps, because again, as we said last time, the Game Boy was a potato, even by 1989 standards. You're talking about something with a chip. Was it like weaker than the PC 6800? Was it on par with like a Atari 2600, something like that? It was a very low-powered system. Had 2 colors, really tight sprite and character limits for anything. So the idea of putting like a full like NES style JRPG on there was kind of insane in the first place. Which means it was right up Kawazu's alley. No one had done it before. And part of his design philosophy is he doesn't want to do things that were done before. Like, he wants to do something new every time he makes a game.
Yeah.
which is experimental and cool. Just I would rather that not get sold at full price. But that's neither here nor there. So the Make SaGa one, it's basically taking the systems from Final Fantasy II. They're making a new world. They do the whole thing where they have you can make a party made out of 4 races: humans, mutants, or Vespers, robots, and monsters. They all have slightly different progression systems. But the main point is that you are nurturing their progression. I think is the way that he at one point tried to put it, as a nurture versus nature. It is not this character's nature to be a fighter or a mage. You are nurturing them to be a fighter or a mage. So SaGa 1, it is what it is. I would say.
It's very simple.
Yeah, it's very straightforward. It's largely playable.
Yeah, it gets the job done when you consider it was an early Game Boy game where people really weren't sure if you really pushed the hardware if it would explode in fire or not.
Yeah. There are definitely Game Boy games, later era Game Boy games that were done by people who pushed the hardware and knew what they were doing. Your Mario Land 2s, your Link's Awakenings, your I'd put the second Game Boy Castlevania game in there.
Yeah, they definitely pushed it over time. And I mean, when you compare...
This is early.
When you compare the SaGa games to Pokemon Yellow, it feels like a different generation entirely. So SaGa 1 comes out, it's successful because it's the RPG on the Game Boy. So they make SaGa 2. They turn it around in a year. Small team. And there's a lot of asset reuse. They reuse the same for character races. The same basic structure, I suppose you could say, is taken over. Items, abilities, all that. They're at the art assets. For what they were. There's a lot of reuse. The biggest change mechanically is that the character progression, instead of being predictable and instead of having predictable invisible experience counters behind all of the attributes, like in Final Fantasy II or SaGa 1, instead there is a dice roll after every fight to determine for each attribute whether or not it'll go up for a character. So it takes the previous system and adds RNG to the progression, which makes it non-predictable, makes it inconsistent, and destroys the entire experience. ZP, you have feelings?
Kawazu has shown repeatedly that he actually does feel like, well, in D&D, he would be, Braden, join me in saying this. Kawazu would be someone who asks you to roll for stats and live with them and not
roll
reroll.
3d6 in order. Oh, absolutely.
But also, he's used RNG in other weird ways before and would continue to do so afterwards. Final Fantasy II definitely has activity-based progression. Its activity-based progression system gives you statistics that are RNG in and of themselves. Sometimes you'll gain a lot of HP. Sometimes you'll gain not a lot of HP.
So, I think this game... I think... Would you say it's safe to say that this game is the true genesis of SaGa as the heterodox JRPG franchise? Because Final Fantasy II and SaGa 1 are both early enough and experimental enough that you could wave them away as just oh, this is a failed experiment. Oh, they're trying stuff and they don't know what they're doing. By the time you get to SaGa 2 and 3...
Well, SaGa 3 doesn't really count. That was a different team.
Okay.
And I would say that Romancing SaGa is that point where it became very clear. Because, SaGa 1 and 2, they're on the Game Boy. Who cares? Square's dicking around. So it wouldn't have been obvious as to what SaGa was until Romancing SaGa came around. And that's when it was really off to the races once Kawazu had more than 8 bits of processing
Okay.
at his disposal.
So I only played this game for a couple hours. I made a party of one of each race.
That's the way to do it.
My main character is a robot, and we had a human, an Esper, and a slime. And so the humans and Espers progress like Final Fantasy II characters, sort of, asterisk, in that, using things will make you better at that thing, asterisk. The asterisk is sometimes based on really complex math. Robots are almost entirely based on equipment.
They're entirely based on equipment.
Yeah,
And
they don't have
then
any
monsters eat meat that is occasionally dropped by other monsters.
And it
that
changes them into a random other monster.
Well, listen, if you look at the meat encyclopedia, you can see which meat will turn which monster into which other monster.
Okay, tell me about your meat, Braden.
Okay, so the meat encyclopedia, I'm a big fan of carne asada and al pastor. I had to explain to someone what taco meats were because this person apparently does not have any good Mexican food near them.
Wait, what? That's not true.
No, this person, who I will
full of
not name on this
shit.
podcast, did not know what adobada was. And I felt very bad for this person.
Yeah.
Anyways, so
you have these races which are kind of classes in themselves. They all progress in a different way. Some of them more normally in the humans. They'll get stronger with equipment, but also, their attack, defense, and HP will, sometimes go up after a battle, dice rolls and all that.
yeah.
Mutants or espers are the mages, so they have magic at their disposal. Learning new magic is also a dice roll at the end of battles, depending on if you've used magic in that battle. And they also get HP and attack and defense, the same way as the humans. So, and also the mutants or Vespers? Mutants. The mutants. They can only hold so many spells, so they're like Pokemon in that regard. And the spells they don't have MP. The spells have the number of uses you get before you have to go rest and refill.
Right.
But when they learn new ones, the new one, there's no option to hey, do you want to replace any of these spells with a new spell? It's no, whatever the bottom spell on the list is a spell that gets replaced.
You have to rearrange your spells in order to pick which one gets removed when you learn something new.
And also the spells take up the same slots as weapons and armor as well.
And they re-implemented this in this remake. Because I want to be clear, this remake seems maybe not 100% faithful to the original, but
it's very close.
It seems very close in terms of the core mechanics are the core mechanics. It's a little bit Fire Emblem Echoes in that way.
Yeah, the mechanics were almost one-to-one translated from the Game Boy to the DS. I read somewhere that they eased up on the RNG aspect of the progression, but I didn't notice anything different, really.
I didn't play enough to know either way.
Game still feels mean-spirited to it in its core.
This game is weird.
Here's the thing: the game isn't that hard.
No.
The issue is that you don't feel like the gameplay
you have any control over anything you're doing.
To anything. You don't feel like you have any agency over the progression, and that's the real problem. Is it feels terrible to level up based on RNG.
This sounds very similar to what we said when we recorded a podcast on a different SaGa game, where perhaps having character progression be entirely at the whims of a cruel and capricious god is not very satisfying unless you're a very specific kind of weirdo.
And yet, Braden,
which I may be inclined
better than.
No, this is still recognizable as a JRPG in a way that Unlimited SaGa is not. You can see the weird this game is like weirdly simple, but it also entirely exists off the strength of its weirdo ideas, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I wanted to touch on
Whereas,
both this and Unlimited Saga. My personal theory about Kawazu growing up with Jinsei games and his fascination with that kind of board game
yeah,
probably influences a lot of his love of RNG.
what you everyone loves Fortune Street.
Now, just to play devil's advocate, Saga 2, Final Fantasy Legend 2, whatever you want to call it, that game reviewed really well. Like, it was widely considered a superior game to the first Saga.
I think you
there's more
could
stuff
play
in
this
it.
game normally without looking at an extensive spreadsheet or FAQ and probably get through it just fine.
I would also say, I guess the weird novelty is with it's a maybe we didn't talk about this. This is a sci-fi world rather than a
let's talk
fantasy
about
world.
the story.
My robot man has a gun.
Yes, the robot starts off with a gun, and you can get better guns. There's also magic. It's eclectic, you could say. There isn't a unifying theme, other than just whatever. I guess Kawazu and his team felt
There's
like.
no interest in creating a coherent world.
No, and there's a novelty to that. So the story is, you're a kid in a village. Your father is an adventurer. He leaves one day to go hunt for the 77 pieces of magi, the 77 somethings that if you put them together, will into a goddess statue will do something. So he takes off. Years later, your character, your created character, and his or her created school friends go off on an adventure to find this deadbeat dad. An adventure through multiple worlds. There are multiple worlds, so it's not one world; it's multiple worlds, and they're stacked along a heavenly pillar kind of thing. So you're going up and down this pillar to different worlds, like 11 of them or so.
Yeah.
And each one has its own theme, has their own good guys, bad guys that you meet. The character limit keeps the writing from being too deep, but like at one point, pretty early on, there's like a fantastic voyage thing you do where you're shrinking down and going into someone's body.
Yeah.
Because there's magi in there.
Yeah.
You go to. Like the bad guys have like high tech bases, but next to high tech bases is like a standard, JRPG desert town. There's a world with an evil goddess in the Tsukimichi style, who's ruling over like a high tech city in the middle of a jungle, and there's a volcano there. It's very weird. There's dragon racing at one point.
Yeah.
There's a you find the deadbeat father. There's a miscommunication thing where you think for a while that he just ran off to have a second family. But no, that's not the case. That father, once you find him, he fake dies like 3 or 4 times after that.
Right.
Quite a lot actually. The man dies a lot. There isn't like a unifying bad guy because there's like a bunch of warlords trying to gather the magi together.
This game absolutely has the feeling of a guy who read a lot of disparate D&D modules and just said, let's shove them all in the game. And, I feel like that is a trend that continues with the Saga series and Kawazu's enjoyment of making vignettes and
the
specific...
the unhinged nature of the plot is a positive for this game.
Yeah, absolutely. I also want to say I can't help but respect Akitoshi Kawazu from the pure conceptual level, and I think I said this to Braden while I was streaming yesterday. That man has made basically the same game, but completely differently every single time. And that when he makes a game, it's not going to be like anything you've ever played before, but you
He
know
makes the
what a
video games
Kawazu game
for
is.
himself.
Yeah, and he makes games for himself, and there are people who are able to like transpose themselves into his brain, and these games make perfect sense.
There are people who have told us they like Unlimited Saga.
Yeah, a good game.
Yeah. Definitely not bottom 3.
So yeah, so that's weird.
Give us
there's
one more time with Cassidy, and maybe it will get nudged out of there.
There you go. Well, I mean, I'm not going to spoil anything. So, there's other systems as well. In the original Game Boy version, the Magi themselves, you can equip those, and they they have like perks associated with them for your characters that can do different things. And the DS remake, they added in a whole system where you're going around finding muses in different worlds. And once you find them and I guess rescue them for whatever hilarious hijinks they're up to, they will grant you MP for doing certain things.
Yeah,
in the
Muse
game.
points.
Muse points, of course. And then you can spend those Muse points to buy Threads of Fate from a special kind of shop.
Of course.
Another game.
And
That's a different game.
Yes,
Yeah.
and those Threads of Fate.
A good game.
I never figured out how to use the damn things, but it's supposed to. You use them in conjunction with the relationship between your created party members, who, mind you, aren't characters really. Don't really have much personality other than just the robot guy or the magic lady. But they have relations. They have a relationship strand between each of them. And the threads of fate are, labeled for emotions like love, hate, that kind of thing. And so you use those somehow to alter the vibe of the party between the different characters' relationships, and that gives your party different titles. And the titles of the party can affect optional cutscenes, certain gameplay stuff.
It's so fucking
weird.
Things.
It is one of the
so many weird bespoke parts, huh?
Yeah.
It's one of the most what's the word I'm looking for?
Mental. It's mental.
Abstruse, opaque things I've seen.
Because
again, I tried. I don't understand it.
It's
nuts.
Is this like when you know people who are very into submarine sims? Or like stuff that not even like Hearts of Iron, but like Unity of Command.
Or, people who play flight sims with HOTAS support and full realism.
I think it's one of those things?
It takes a different kind of psychology. Like, so it's a slightly different kind of psychology to unravel this stuff and figure it out versus like the HOTAS people.
Yeah.
But
would you play more of this?
So I didn't play more of it. Every time I thought about going and playing it, I bounced off and I ended up playing Trails in the Sky instead.
Oh, I've heard about this game.
Yeah, I know. It's this little obscure game.
Hey, have you heard about the Trails games? They're really good. You only have to play all 12 of them.
Yeah, How Long to Beat says that it's south of 20 hours, more like 15.
Yeah, that's the thing, because SaGa 2, it's not a hard game. You get to the boss fights, and like if you've done any like grinding around for money for equipment upgrades, then you've probably triggered an RNG update on your characters enough, or eaten enough meat to find the right monster.
No. Eat the correct meat.
And if you get those checks, like when you get those skill checks to like increase your stats, like when they pop off 2 or 3 times in a row, which will happen to at least once, it's a good feeling. You can notice the jump.
But you can consistently grind out for money, and money buys equipment. Equipment upgrades the robot who's strong in the early game. So focus on the robot in the early game. And if you do that, you will hit the RNG checks enough that when you go to the boss fights, whichever boss fight's next, it's not hard.
Yeah. I'm surprised you
So-
didn't mention how in the remake they de-emphasized the Native American headdress that the female character wears in the key art for the first game or the original.
Here's the thing, though. The female Vesper design in the key art for the first game, you don't see any of that in the game itself.
No.
So they just like redesigned everything of what the intended art style is supposed to be, because like almost 20 years later, they're not dealing with like what was it, 5x5 sprites. They're actually doing 3D character models.
They still give her a battle
yeah.
bikini though.
Yeah. But
Do
like,
they?
yeah,
Because I posted those pictures. That's not a battle bikini.
I
the
would
new
say
one.
this remake graphically looks on similarly or on par with the FF3 and 4 remakes on DS. Like a similar art direction in terms of chibi characters.
Yeah, it does seem like it's using the same engine.
But what if your characters were a slime and a robot?
What if you were a slime?
But yeah, it's
It's wild. It's bizarre. Immediately after this, Kawazu and his people got put on to developing Romancing Saga for the brand new Super Famicom, and Saga 3 was made by a completely different team, who made it more normal. I mean, the plot's still like unhinged and wild, but the mechanics are more normal.
Yeah.
Which is why the Saga 3 remake for DS that Kawazu produced made a lot of changes to the.
Yeah.
I mean,
underlying
Romancing
mechanics.
Saga 2 is maybe one of the most audacious games he's ever made.
We might need to cover more of his stuff, honestly.
Because everything
At
makes
some
is
point,
off
I'll
the deep
find
end,
one
right?
that I enjoy.
And the Frontier games have that nice painterly watercolor art.
Yeah, so one of the things about Kawazu is he teams up with, art and sound people who are good at their jobs,
Yeah.
know what they're doing. So
I
that's a
think
plus.
the music in this DS remake is pretty good.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, but you can't even say that because he was the point guy to salvage Final Fantasy 12 when the original creator burnt out and had to go on medical leave. Like, and admittedly, that original growth system and level license board system was not great, but
I
they
can see a
trusted him.
little bit of that, and there's definitely a little bit of Kawazu in the way
They
the original
trusted
license
him to
board
save
is.
that game, huh?
Yeah,
so that's why I like Final Fantasy 12. So
that's why the Zodiac edition is the best version of FF12.
yes. So Kawazu, he knows how to work with talent, get stuff out of teams. Like, he's good at that, which is why he's probably risen through the ranks.
He's also
in Square.
One of the last early Square employees who still works there. So I get the impression he has enough personal capital to swing his weight around and be like, all right, I gotta make a new Saga game. In this one, you collect cats, but if you collect too much cats, you don't get the good ending for this character.
So here's what I think. I did some research, not a ton, but what it looks like, at least on the surface, is at this point with these new modern Saga games, he's producing those. He's not directing them.
Okay.
So he's probably passing the torch of being a weirdo.
Is this like the thing they put the young new developers on? Just like, all right, go
Right,
nuts.
No. I like to think that it's the Square Enix trial by fire. It's like, all right, guys, so this is how you go through the ranks of Square Enix. You got to listen to Akatoshi Kawazu for about 3 hours, and then you got to make whatever he says to you
Yep.
a video game that
Yeah.
people actually want to play.
You want to work on Final Fantasy VII Rebirth?
You got to work with
you gotta
Akatoshi
collect this
Kawazu at
cat
least
first.
once. Like it warmed my heart, guys. It really did warm my heart when Emerald Beyond came out this year.
Yes.
And that game was very mixed. People either loved that game, like people were giving it 9s and 8s, or people were giving it like 5 out of 10s and 4s.
Yeah.
And it's like, bravo, Kawazu, you don't change for nobody. You don't change.
I'm interested in that game. Not $40 interested, but one day.
But it sounds like...
And that's the thing, because all of his ideas are very experimental. You want to see what they are, but you don't want to pay full retail price for that.
No, like that's the frustrating
thing. I paid $10 for my copy of Unlimited Saga.
It's like you said, that's the frustrating thing. Like, I wish I could recommend people to go out and buy that remasters, because they took a Game Boy game, like an OG Game Boy game, and then re-released them on modern consoles. They're selling them for way too much money for that. Like flat out.
You're telling me $40 for 3 Game Boy games seems a little audacious.
Yeah, it's a bit much.
I think the SaGa collection of SaGa Final Fantasy Legend is actually $20, but even then, like
it's no collection of mana, is what I'm hearing.
No.
Yeah, I think it's only $20, but even still, that's a lot. You have to be real sick in the head to pay $20 for the first 3 SaGa games.
You're getting Final Fantasy Legend 1, 2, and 3.
Who on this podcast did that months ago and just had this game laying around?
Who's to say?
When it came time for the grab bag?
Who's to say?
Yeah. So, interesting idea. Kawazu is an unmoving force. You can't change him. You can't do anything to fix him. And you know what? God bless him. I'm happy we have people like him.
Where are we going to rank this? Because my general feelings on this game are that, weird fucked leveling aside, it's fine.
Yeah.
I think it's playable, and I don't think you need to stare at a FAQ in the same way you do with even FF2.
All right, so let's start on the list with the game that Kawazu claims to be his favorite of all time. Ultima 4.
Okay, yeah, of course. I think this game is worse than Ultima 4.
It's worse.
All right, is this game better or worse than Dragon Quest 1?
I would play Dragon Quest 1. I would play Dragon Quest 1. Don't you guys joke around here.
Don't fuck with me. I would rather play DQ1 and Megami Tensei 1.
Is this game better or worse than Gauntlet?
Gauntlet's addictive, even if it's exploitative.
I'd put this above Gauntlet.
Okay. Would you put this above or below Anachronox?
Oh God, Jesus. I would play Anachronox.
Really?
I would play. I might play this over Anachronox.
Yeah.
You would play this over Anachronox?
Because this game is all mechanics, and you can zoom through the battles.
Maybe I'm nostalgic of Anachronox because I actually played it all the way to the end, and I just have Stockholm Syndrome. But okay, I'm not going to make a big stink about this.
SaGa 2 doesn't give me motion sickness, so any day of the week, I'll take it. All right, so actually, this is probably where we should have started. Is this better or worse than Final Fantasy Adventure?
This is worse.
This is absolutely worse.
Final Fantasy Adventure is good.
All right, so is this better or worse than Risen?
I would rather play Risen than this.
Yeah.
All right, so is this the new number 25?
Our new number 25? I would put that here, yes.
That sounds about right.
Shoutouts to our new number 25.
I guess I'm surprised.
2.
Wait, we ranked this above Medabots?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. I would rank this above Medabots.
Yeah. Okay. I guess so, if you must insist.
I do.
Oh,
I mean,
you're gonna
really,
come to my house and threaten to hurt me if I insist the opposite?
like for me, the problem
Sounds like
is
something you'd do.
I would rank this above Anachronox, but also below Time and Eternity. But that's just me.
Yep. So you think I'm sick in the head, Braden?
So Stockholm Syndrome. Speaking of Stockholm Syndrome. All right, that is our new number 25, Saga 2, the DS remake that is pretty faithful to the original. And I think that is. Do we have any closing thoughts on this before we do wrap up?
It's I don't know if I want to recommend. I don't
Portable
think you need
video
to go
game.
out of your way to play it. Like that sounds mean. Maybe play the first game first. But the first game's so unlike the second game, so I can't even say that, right?
I would say I feel like maybe if we want full fat Saga, we should check out Romancing Saga.
Yeah,
or Saga
play one
Frontier.
of the Romancing Saga games. I would recommend 2. Okay.
We'll have to give that a look because they sure did remake Romancing Saga 2. That's
Yeah, they
coming out
did.
this year. Soon, I believe.
My main takeaway from this this grab bag is that Trails in the Sky is pretty good.
Yeah. You're telling me that portable RPG is pretty good?
Yeah.
That's good. I'm happy for you. At some point, I'll play one of those, and then I'll have opinions on it and be one of those people who's like, no, listen, Trails is really good. You should play all of them.
Speaking of some messed up series, I had to watch an hour and a half video explaining the release orders, the in-game orders of the games, the localization orders, and how it all matched up, and how that should influence the play order that you play the games in.
Yeah.
Now that's a messed up series.
Yeah. I'm very excited for us.
We've got stuff. So do we want to talk a little bit about what the plans are
our
for
next game, I was going to do my pick, but I'm waiting on a guest for that one. So we're gonna go with the backup idea. So for our next episode, we are going to do in a fun version of this. We are going to do interesting console ports of computer role-playing video games.
Okay.
I'm talking Diablo for the PlayStation 1. I'm talking the Famicom versions of Ultima 3 and 4. Maybe some other stuff.
So look forward to me talking about the Diablo.
Let me tell
or the
if you
PlayStation.
want to hear me talk
Oh,
about
no, wait, that's different.
Eye of the Beholder's Sega CD soundtrack and how bonkers it is.
Bonkers good soundtrack. Holy shit.
Yeah.
We've
So
got
look forward to
games
that.
to play, and not all of them are terrible.
We have some stuff to look forward to. And please look forward to the Oju-san cast, which is, I guess, what we're calling our anime podcast.
Yep.
$3 on the Patreon. You can support us at patreon.com/deeplistens. Our theme song, Halfway, is done by SuperSex420. You can find them on Bandcamp. Furthermore, you can find all of us on the internet. Borgmaster, where can they find you?
They can find me at twitch.tv/5thgenerationgaming or at 5thgengaming.blog.
You can find me at twitch.tv/arbitrarywater. I used to write things. Maybe I'll write things again.
I'll try to write things soon. I'm also on twitch.tv/zombiepie.
All right. Well, thank you both for joining me on this adventure. Just remember, there's no such thing as cheating in a single-player game. And also, I beat Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous again.
Yay!
That
Wait,
game-
isn't this your first time playing it all the way?
No,
Oh,
no, I beat it at launch.
okay. Well,
It took me 150 hours to beat it again.
what was your mythic path, baby?
Legend.
Talk about it.
I went
okay.
demon into legend,
Oh.
and I was level 40. And in the story, they frame it like you are giving up your incredible mythic powers, but actually having an extra 20 levels for your main character lets you do some very stupid things. So I would still recommend that game. That game's not going to be ranked on this podcast because
I wouldn't want someone like us to be beholden to 150 plus hours.
I mean,
although
I
I've
could
already
do a
played it,
podcast
so I
on
probably
right now.
could speak about this.
All right, our new number. Congratulations to our new number 1, Pathfinder: Wrath of the Righteous.
Okay.
No,
Okay.
Yeah,
Well
that
then,
was-
all right. So orb mitts.
Orb.
So orb mitts. So you get
Okay, so there's this girl with twin
there's this
tails,
girl.
and she likes to hit people with her stick.
yes, she's a tsundere tomboy.
And also,
as you
she's a
do.
sneakerhead.
And she loves sneakers.
There's no such thing as cheating in a single-player game. Goodbye.
And